And I would like to actually push this onto other people, get more people interested in joining the upcoming tournament. So there is that to consider. Anyway, I did actually ask around for a set of questions on Discord, and the first one of those is AAVs. When shouldn't you get them? And put simply, there is very few times not to get AAVs. A lot of that actually comes down to the fact that, at its core, you want to be using skimmers and LAVs. That was actually, as far as anyone looking at this replay wondering, that was Tomcat Zeno. This was a 3v3 with random teams, and when he saw his team lineup, he decided that his only hope was to rush and try and kill me, and obviously that ended with his demise. So, but hey, sometimes that is your only option. But the thing is that spamming or having a large number of LAVs or skimmers isn't simply due to the way resources work, the fact that you have more CUs to burn early on. It comes down to the fact that they are easily available, they are fast, and they provide good damage output. And to replace skimmers or LAVs, you need a unit that can kill them. Now, assault ships fail in that role. They do not have the mobility, they do not have the kind of properties to disable or cope with the large numbers of LAVs or skimmers. I mean, unless there's enough of them that they can just kill them, but again, you're not going to be in a position where you can dictate a fight between assault ships and strike craft. It just doesn't work that way. You are relying on your opponent playing poorly as opposed to you having any control. AVs, however, can replace LAVs. The issue with that is if you instead run AAVs, your opponent counters you with railguns. Those railguns can then be used to fight your carrier. Those railguns can then just generally make your life very difficult, which then forces you back into the LAVs. So again, your core unit, the unit you are always going to come back to, that you should always have a reasonable force of, is LAVs or skimmers, with the rest of your options supplementing or reinforcing that. Any high-level play, you will always see both sides using LAVs or skimmers, and in large numbers. And keep in mind, that's very important, because that allows you to deal with any kind of railgun play. Anyone who wants to spam railguns cannot in that environment. Which then comes back to the point. Skimmers, or LAVs and AAVs works. If you're able to run a dominant force of LAVs with a support group of AAVs, you have the counter to anything that your LAVs may come up against, and you have the counter to the railguns, which will be wanted to deal with your AAVs. They both enable each other. AAVs are still good on large maps. The size of the map is not as impactful as you might believe. Don't get me wrong, on Kalash Teeth, where being able to get AAVs out as quickly as humanly possible does give you a very strong rush option. But at the end of the day, AAVs have quite good movement, especially compared to everything that's not a strike craft, and they have very high damage output. It's only that armor counters them. You can't put more armor on a support cruiser, you can't put more armor on a salvager, so they're a good option for countering any kind of macro play. If someone goes heavy on their eco and AAVs come out of the fog of war and they're not ready for it, they are going to suffer crippling economy damage. Let's see what's going on over here. Looks like there's a fight. Or has been a fight, holy moly. So yeah, just when you compare, if someone is running LEVs and AAVs versus someone running LAVs and railguns, excuse me, we're going to wait for the cruise missile to make someone very upset. That's the other reason that Coalition is number one, by the way, in case anyone wasn't sure. The fact of the matter is that running LAVs and AAVs is cheaper, both for the fact that the tech is cheaper, and then the fact that the individual units you produce are cheaper. And railguns will lose in a straight damage race with an AAV. So, as long as you're controlling the engagements with your LAV blob, or you haven't invested as much into your AAVs as they have in their rails, you've got control of the engagements. You should have more LAVs on the field, and if they want to dive on your LAVs, they're going to get shot and chewed up by AAVs. Meanwhile, AAVs are going to be able to afford to take a couple of railgun hits. Railguns are slower, they are more fragile. The whole point of railguns is you need control of an area. You need to be able to say, you can't come here with LAVs, you can't come here with skimmers. Thus, that entire area becomes their domain. Otherwise, railguns are very easy to kill. If someone rolls in with a max pop cap of railguns and you roll at them with, say, 20 LAVs, what can they do? Die. See, the mix of AAVs and rails is what began the whole meta of railgun wars. As long as people aren't building LEVs and skimmers, rails generally have free reign. It is only by virtue of the fact that LEVs and skimmers are such a threat if they're able to get out of hand that railguns can be easily and affordably countered. You go way back when. The entire problem was that early on people didn't think that skimmers and LAVs were a viable unit in the late game. So they didn't have them, which is where you saw the whole, I'm just going to roam around Kartoba with max pop of railguns. And I believe that's going to put an end to this replay. It is. Nice amount of carrier fighting in that one. Again, I still feel it was unfortunate that Tom threw away his carrier so early. I think he could have had more impact than that, but again, if you feel like the game's lost before it even begins, yeah. Still, we shall move on to another replay. There we go. But fundamentally, when you look at moving from LAVs into any other tech, AAVs is a cheaper option. It helps you win the strike craft fight, and it's still giving you access to your production upgrade. So it's a cheaper way of increasing your unit output. So it's just too cost effective not to use. Let's see if we can find a better place. Maybe just something a bit different. So again, we are on Kartoba again. We'll see how this one opens out. So fundamentally, the issue is less to do with just the fact that AAVs are cost-effective in and of themselves. They are a cost-effective way of improving your tech. When shouldn't you go with AAVs? If you know your opponent is doing some kind of armor rush, if you scout and find that they're not even bothering to build LAVs, or you already have won the LAV fight, or the Strikecraft fight, then you would jump straight into railguns. Why? Because you want to be sundering targets. You want to be able to threaten their carrier. You want to be able to just... You want to be punching holes in things quicker. And Sunder is very good synergy with both AAVs and LAVs. But you've already got LAVs, so it just kind of makes sense that way. But yeah, especially going into a tournament setting, you want to get in the habit of using Strikecraft. And by virtue of that fact, the AAV will always be a good option. Because you want to win the Strikecraft fight. It's just fundamental. Even if you just ran a single AAV with your blob of Strikecraft and you use that as a base, if your enemy wants to rush you down, you have that AAV to fall back to. It's going to be cost effective. And at the same time, it's moving you towards your cruiser tech, it's allowing you to have that production upgrade, and it's the cheapest way to that. So... And again, as long as you have a dominant Strikecraft force, it doesn't matter if your enemy suddenly pulls out railguns. And in the case of LAVs, it doesn't really matter so much if they go air, because your LAVs can actually threaten them. So, yeah. The only thing I would recommend is not to overinvest in pure Strikecraft. It is very easy that you are so invested in Strikecraft that your economy suffers for it, or you essentially imbalance your economy. You don't have the CUs to start building your own railguns, or to afford moving into, say, more more cruiser-focused builds. And you're also in a situation where you can't keep building the LAVs because you don't have the CU income to support it. So you do still need to develop technologically, and one of the common ones to build off of out of LAVs is to go into air, which can be very strong. Yeah. We've gotten off the subject mostly, but AAVs are a very strong option. The only reason you wouldn't bother with them basically is you've already won the Strikecraft war. You don't need that. You want railguns to go and carry a hunt, or you want air so that you can have, you can burn through your RU bank. But outside of that, AAV tech is pretty much 99% a safe choice. So one of the other questions I was given to do with expanding, moving out to those additional recs, when you should do it, why you should do it. I mean, it's a very tough one to answer, but really you want to expand as soon as possible. The only issue is making sure it is safe. You've got to keep in mind, so each individual node, so each of these points, these salvagers pick up 50 CUs every 12 seconds. Okay. Meanwhile, as far as RUs, they're picking up 40 of those every 30 seconds. But what that means is that fundamentally, each singular RU node is worth 500 CUs a minute. So you've got to think that it's not just a case of how long does it take for an expansion to pay for itself, but how long can you live without that additional income? How long can you cope without the additional 1,000 CU a minute income? Okay, so holding both these recs, just if you've gotten out here, you put a support cruiser on it, you're only harvesting those CUs, every minute is worth 10 LAVs. You want these recs. The sooner the better. The only issue is how to do it safely. I mean, you imagine if I'd just gone full expansion here, these AAVs would now be wrecking my everything. And they are going to chew through this unupgraded AV quite happily. Unfortunately for them, they're going to run into railguns. Now, although it wasn't a question, I feel like it does relate to it somewhat. It's important to keep in mind one of the benefits. I say benefit, it's double-edged sword, really. Because you build from the Coalition Soban carrier, if you are being attacked, if someone is coming towards you aggressively, wherever your carrier is where you are making your stand, if you can build the counter to what is coming at you from your carrier, then all you need to make sure is where you're rallying to, where you're ready to hold, is where your carrier is. So I mean, my main, as far as I'm concerned, is safe. Doesn't matter what is coming towards main, because as long as I scout it, I will just produce what I need to counter any aggression against my main. That's the same for Coalition. If I was all the way up here, as long as I can see where the enemy has come from, I would just spam whatever unit I feel would best counter the force coming towards me. The end. Unfortunately, I'm playing as Soban. I don't feel like it's safe for me to put my carrier out there, so I am playing it safe. Now let's go back to a more cinematic view. This is less the case for Knef and Galcian. See, whereas it's beneficial to be able to produce units far out in the field, far away from where your carrier is, it also spreads your forces out. You're all over the place. So it means you're far more vulnerable to raiding. Because if they go somewhere and you've got a single production cruiser there, yeah, you can produce units there, but not in sufficient quantity fast enough to actually counter that push. So what ends up happening is you drip feed units into a meat grinder, and it just makes your situation worse, not better. So that's something important to keep in mind as far as expanding for Coalition and Soban versus expanding as Galcian and Knef. Another thing as far as raiding the various factions, when you are attacking Galcian or Knef, you are best focusing on the salvages. The salvages don't have any options as far as repair, the salvages have less armor, so you can kill them quite quickly. When you raid Coalition or Soban, you want to focus on the support cruisers, because they'll sit and repair those salvages as you're attacking them. You just aren't going to effectively deal damage. So again, always be sure to focus the support cruiser. It can't heal itself, and you're more likely to actually kill it. Plus, without the self-repairs, it means that even if you don't kill it, you may be able to come back later and it's still at half health or 10% health, and you can finish it off. I would say the other opportune target whenever you're hitting the Coalition, and to a lesser extent Soban, is to just knock out logistics modules. Losing 15 pop suddenly, as well as the 250 CUs that are invested in these, is useful. And sometimes it's better to take that trade, knocking out one of those, than to risk achieving nothing. So hopefully that covers most of that. One other very big one, for anyone who is going on the offensive, your units will tend to prioritize shooting at salvages. And it is very frustrating and costs you a lot of damage output a lot of the time. So if you imagine I go charging in at this expansion here, right? And I go in with just railguns, right? So we're going to say that 5 railguns pop over this little ridge here, and I leave them to fire automatically. They're going to try and shoot these salvages. Okay, they've got about a 50% hit rate versus salvages, so it might take them quite a while to actually kill anything. Now, what I can do is I can tell them to focus fire on the support cruiser, or I could give them a control drag, the red attack box, just to make sure they're shooting at what I want them to. As an extra sort of consideration there, let's say you're dealing with a Coalition base runner which is coming to put down the turret, and you'll make sure that your LAVs focus the turret. Again, using that red attack box with the control and then drag selection, you can make sure even if the turret is underneath that base runner, they'll focus on that turret first. They'll prioritize the turret over the base runner. So you can ensure that you're not getting in that position where there's a turret there you want to kill, you can't shoot it, which can be incredibly frustrating. The same thing can be done using your railguns. You're going to a big fight and you want to make sure that you're shooting their railguns. Just control box over them, and then they'll focus on the railguns first. It's very handy, quite quick to do. Bit of practice to get used to, but very useful. Now, just trying to think additional questions that were asked of me. I know it was put forward as far as using air. That is not a happy carrier right there. So battle cruisers seem to be very popular nowadays, and I don't really blame them. They are very good burst damage and highly durable. And they actually have the range where their low mobility isn't such a problem. If you don't mind, I think we'll... yep, that carrier is dead. Double push by Coalition and Soban. That is nasty. I suppose that's worthy of commentary. I was informed that if you are about to lose... if you do lose your carrier and a tech is in progress, the tech will actually complete. The only thing losing your carrier actually does is it denies you access to your research menu. It doesn't actually remove it. So, I mean, fundamentally, if you could figure out a way of accessing the research menu after your carrier dies, you would actually be able to continue doing research. But yeah. Oh, that's actually incredibly frustrating. So these heavy railguns were actually doing quite a lot of damage to this carrier. However, they started focusing a logistics module, which is probably one of the worst targets they could focus. That's pretty mean. We'll do Argon, don't worry. But let's cover air first. Air is incredibly powerful in Deserts of Kerak. As a matter of fact, there are plenty of situations where it is quite frankly overpowered. Ooh, what are they getting hit with? That looks like Coalition nuke. Yep, nice chunk of damage. If that was a high ground nuke, it may have actually been a kill as well, but... Jesus, that was fired from all the way over there. Anyway, let's get back to the cinematic view. Whew. So, air as an option is incredibly powerful. There are two reasons for this. One is it grants you a lot of upfront damage. Air units fly over and they drop quite substantial front-end damage, and really they rival railguns for potency in that effect. And keep in mind, the interceptors are doing 150 damage per missile, and they fire them in three missile volleys. So that again, times by 3 interceptors, is some very nasty damage output. The fact that they can then make 4 passes like that is, quite frankly, disgusting. But strike fighters aren't bad either. They actually have a longer range to fire from. I don't think it's much, but they do actually have more range than the interceptors do. And here's what I was talking about. So these railguns coming in here, and really they should be focusing on this carrier, and they're trying to shoot these salvagers. All of this is shots. Right, so here we go, and then I've now told them, shoot the damn carrier. So do be aware of that when playing. If there are ever salvagers in sight, your railguns will focus on the stupid salvagers and not on the big, fat, juicy carrier. For anyone looking to abuse that, do feel free to take a salvager or 2 into the front line with you along with your carrier and really upset your opponent. Anyway, back to the spectacles. I think we're about to have a big fight. So yes, strike fighters again, because they take 3 missiles to kill, they're a lot more difficult to actually cope with. Also, being cheaper, you're going to see a lot more of them. They can really hit critical mass, and very quickly. It is not uncommon for a Coalition or a Soban player to just get a max cap of strike fighters and drop them on you. And the only effective counter to that is to have interceptors, usually. Support cruisers with the AA upgrade can... Oof. That was a very nice cruise missile. Things like support cruisers with the AA upgrade are very potent. Mass, or I say mass, say four or five missile batteries, 3 or 4 missile ships could cope to some extent, but again, it would be a trade situation rather than where interceptors will dominate the air. And strike fighters are surprisingly incompetent at fighting air battles, unfortunately. Really, the biggest mistake I see with people using air is they don't do any micro. The moment you don't micro air units, what you're actually doing is saying, I'm definitely going to get my initial salvo, but then after that, it's really up to my opponent. And it's also a big RU sink. If you're losing a lot of air units, you can find yourself in a huge RU deficit very quickly. So yeah, do be aware of that. Good ways of handling air units. It's literally the only way I know to effectively command and control a large air force is to deploy all of it to a quiet area and then either double click or control click to select all of that unit. For those of you who aren't aware, if you hold down control and click on a unit, you will get all of that type. I believe I can give an example of that. There we go. And I select all of the railguns. Select all of the AVs. This is very useful for managing larger forces and splitting it up somewhat. Otherwise, it is a case of going into a tactical view and being all like, those railguns there, those railguns there. But if you wanted to say, I want all of my AVs over there, I want all of my railguns there, I want all of my LAVs here, control click is the best way of doing it. And that applies to air. It is the most reliable, easiest way to select all of a set of air units without having to try and double click on a tiny fast moving target. So yes. Let's have a look, see what is going on. I don't think this match is going to go on much longer, I will be quite honest. But there are 3 carriers here, so that's... Oof. That was a very effective microwave emitter. So yeah, fundamentally the way I would recommend anyone uses air is that if they're not sure, if they are not comfortable using air units often, they should probably stick to only using about three interceptors or 3 strike fighters at a time. They want to try and keep it manageable. When using them, they should try and scout with them first. They have the best view range. Take advantage of that first. Don't go rushing in like, I need to do damage now. Unless you know there is no AA to deal with already. The last thing you want to do is launch a set of expensive aircraft and then lose them because you didn't realize there's 2... Oh. Coal bombers coming out. You didn't realize that your opponent had placed 2 AA turrets. So... just keep that in mind. As far as the heavier air units, the Gaussian and Kneff bomber, the precision bomber, is incredibly strong. It has the speed to outpace fighters. It does incredible damage. Really, the only problem with it is the fact that if your opponent is also running an air force, it can get blown out of the sky quite quickly. But no, precision bombers are really good. If you have the opportunity to use them, I highly recommend them. They are amazing. is that game. That's looking like it. Oh, we've still got one player holding out over here. No more. Well, gunships are the most difficult one because gunships have the opportunity to do some really good damage early game, but then due to the effectiveness of armor against their damage output, they can drop off rather quickly. But yeah, core suggestions, if you are looking at using air, I recommend just sticking with the strike fighters and interceptors for now. But going into precision bombers, if you're playing as Knef or Gelsian, I do recommend it. They're good. They're really good. One piece of information you should keep in mind, though, using bombers, is that all bombers, so the precision bomber and the tactical bomber, both do half damage to carriers. Okay? So whatever their displayed damage is, it will be half that, and then they will also suffer the negative 2 of armor as well. So just keep that in mind.